Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Torna, the Golden Country. Now that is a mouthful, and the reason for the lengthy subtext is this game is a prequel to Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Now, I would actually recommend that you do play through the main game of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 before you play this one, just like I did. It was several years ago before I was doing casual reviews, so you won't find a video on the main game. But the reason that I recommend playing through the main game before you play through this prequel is because this game assumes that you know a lot about the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I think that the developers of the game meant for you to play through the main game before you play through this one, just because of how the story beats go. It's just like a lot of the details about this world are kind of glossed over, and you may feel a little lost if you did this one first. But I'm going to give a quick overview about the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in case you've never played the game. If you see my Xenoblade Chronicles 1 video, you will know that that game takes place on two giant dead titans, the Bionis and the Mechonis. In this game, there are a ton of different titans in which a lot of different creatures reside on top of their backs, and these titans are alive, so they're moving animals swimming slowly through this foggy ocean. Now, I can't exactly explain the links between Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. I have a fairly decent idea about how the two worlds are linked, but I will say that it isn't required to play through the first one before you play through Xenoblade Chronicles 2 or Torna, because they essentially take place in entirely different worlds, and it gets very complicated and muddy from here, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is supposed to give more of a definitive link between these two games, so just know that this game takes place on a different world than Xenoblade Chronicles 1, with lots of different living titans rather than just two dead ones. Now, in this world, there are these, I guess you could call them creatures, known as blades, and they are these organisms that reside inside a crystal. And if they have compatibility with a person known as a driver, the driver will resonate with the blade crystal and activate the blade. And the blade is kind of like the soul of a weapon. I know this is sounding already like really confusing, and I'm trying my best to simplify it, but just know that there is a bond between a blade and a driver. And so this story mostly revolves around a driver by the name of Laura and her blade Jin. And if you've played through the original Xenoblade Chronicles 2, you may recognize that Jin name, and that he even references Laura. So this is definitely like a prequel, and it will give you a little bit more backstory to what Jin is all about. Now, another main character that you may recognize in this game and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is Mythra, and Mythra is a really powerful blade known as an Aegis, and she has a twin blade known as Malos, and Malos acts like the antagonist in this game, just kind of wants to see the world burn, doesn't really think that the world is worth saving, and just wants to see it all be destroyed. Now, his motives are a little more complex than that, but just know that Mythra and her driver, Adam, are set out to defend the Titan Torna against the Aegis blade Malos. There are a ton of cinematics here, which always look very cool, and if you can't tell by now, this game is extremely anime, so I think that the characters look really cool, really edgy design, spiky hair, all of that. I feel really bad for some of the female characters, mostly Mythra, in fact, because she is just like a twig of a woman with a really huge chest, and I feel incredibly bad for her back because she's got to be holding a lot of weight up front. And that will lead me to the combat mechanics. And if you thought me trying to explain the premise of this game was confusing, the combat is also pretty daunting. But to simplify it, think of it kind of like an MMO combat where characters are doing their basic attack, and then you build up your basic attacks in order to use special attacks, and this links into combos with your partners, and these combos build upon other combos in order to unleash a ton of extra damage. And while this does sound confusing, I think one of the best parts about this game is really mastering the combat here and squaring off against these giant, huge enemies. They have these special enemies called unique monsters that are scattered across the world, and they are, think of them as like extra tough side bosses that you encounter. And my favorite parts about this game are tackling some of these unique monsters and really challenging myself against them, trying to build up all of these combos in order to unleash a ton of damage. Now, it takes a lot of time to build up these combos in order to fully use the full combo chain, and so it's kind of frustrating and almost boring playing against like regular enemies because you don't have enough time to really build up those super strong combos. And that's why I enjoy really squaring off against some of these tougher bosses that take a long time, because I can have the time to build up to these really cool combos. You are able to swap between playing your driver and your blade, and this game consists of 3 different drivers, and each driver has 2 blades. Now, in the original Xenoblade Chronicles 2, you are able to unlock additional blades by kind of a gacha system where you find blade cores, resonate with them, and hope that you get a really cool blade out of it. In this game, it is completely choreographed, and each driver is assigned their 2 blades, and you are able to cycle between all of these characters, which leads to quite a lot of different playable options. I mostly decided to play as Adam and Mithra and cycle between the 2 because these characters kind of act more as your damage dealers, whereas Hugo and his blades kind of act like your tankier characters, and then Laura, and then her side blade, not Jin, but the other one, Hayes, I think it is, acts more as your healer. So I didn't want to play the tank or the healer role, so that's when I tended to stick with Adam and Mithra. Now, outside of combat, there is a lot of character building, stat building, if you will, a lot of leveling up and leveling up your abilities, and there's a lot of different equipment that you can attach to both your blades and your drivers. There's a whole skill tree. You're going to be managing quite a lot of skills, so if that doesn't sound exciting to you at all, maybe you want to look at a different game because you're going to be in the menus quite frequently. I'm not going to go too much into the stat building here, although I do want to say that I think it's called the affinity chart for the blades is a little complaint of mine. Basically, it's like a skill tree, but in order to unlock these slots, you have to meet certain requirements, and some of them can be very specific and they build upon each other. So let's say Mithra, her affinity link, she has a slot that says go defeat 2 of these Crabbles at this specific area, and if I didn't take the time to go unlock that affinity link and I just continue to progress through the game, all of those slots behind that one that I didn't unlock remain locked until I go back and defeat those 2 Crabbles. And while it doesn't sound like too big of a deal, imagine doing this for all 6 of your blades, and each of your 6 blades has like 10 different branching paths. That's a lot of objectives that you have to shoot for if you want to potentially unlock everything on their skill tree. I like the idea of it, it's just the execution isn't so great. Maybe if there was just a ton of different slots and they didn't build upon each other in order to unlock future ones, that might be a little bit better, kind of more like an achievement system. There's a lot of quests in this game on top of trying to unlock all your affinity links and things like that. There's a ton of side quests that you can do, and every time you do one of these side quests, the person that you turn the quest in will join your community. And I think this is unique to this game. I don't believe this mechanic was in the original XB2. Basically, you have to build up your community level in order to progress through the game. And I don't really like the idea of this either, even though I was planning on doing the majority of the side quests anyways. I don't like that it forces you to do so in order to progress through the main game. This is especially during the very end of the main game. You have to get your community level up to level 4, and this is a ton of side quests. So if you aren't interested in doing these side quests, just know that you might as well be doing them as you play through the game anyway, because at some point in the game, if you want to finish it, you are going to have to be doing a lot of these. And the side quests are not that exciting in my opinion. Now, story-wise, they may be interesting, but I've never been interested in side quest stories. I typically tend to skip through the dialogue just for the objectives, and I mostly just want to focus on the main story of the game. But yeah, as far as like the side stories go, they might be a little humorous, the dialogue might be fun, but as far as like the objectives of these side quests go, it's mostly like fetch quests or go defeat X amount of characters. Now, there is a lot of icon help in this game, especially on your map, and you are able to fast travel to a lot of different points, so they're very very generous in that aspect. But there are some times where you have to gather materials and they don't necessarily have markers on the map to tell you where to go. And that's when you're going to have to be doing a little bit of research on the internet to find out the percentage rates of some of these resource drops. And it can get a little tedious in that aspect. Cinematically, I just think that this game is so cool though. Like, despite all of these other complaints, I think that the world building in all three of these Xenoblade Chronicle games actually is so awesome, and I love the idea of living on these giant titans, especially in Xenoblade Chronicle 2's world. This world is known as All Rest. I like that the titans in this world are living, and you can actually see them, like their wings slowly moving up and down, or their tail bobbing, or their head, and it makes it feel a lot more alive and real compared to the Xenoblade 1 world, where both of the titans are dead and motionless. And I know it's a really confusing world to wrap your head around, but if you spend the time to really learn the world and the characters and the combat mechanics, it all just fits together so well that I just always feel at home whenever I'm playing these games. You know, it's like every time I play through a Xenoblade Chronicles game, I enjoy the series more and more, and I have a better time with it. It almost feels like comfort food at this point. Just being in this huge open world full of these creatures that are maybe a little bit too strong for you at the moment, but just sightseeing in this game is really cool, and I'm so invested in the series at this point. The music is pretty fun in this game. I can't quite remember what it was like in the original XB2, but this game is actually quite jazzy. Lots of wind instruments and drums, which isn't what you normally would expect. I don't think it had a lot of this jazzy music in the Xenoblade Chronicles 1 game, but it had a lot of this in the overworld when you are exploring through Torna, and I think you also go to the Titan Gormott. But whenever you fight like a big boss, that's when like the electric guitar comes and it's really metal, and it's like, all right, we've had our fun jazzy time, and now it's time to get down to business. A couple more complaints, however. The voice lines themselves get quite annoying over time. They can repeat quite a lot, and the characters like to have this back and forth dialogue with each other that is non-consequential at all. Like, they just like to banter a little bit after you defeat an enemy, and it isn't quite as annoying as Xenoblade Chronicles 1, where they say the exact same voice lines over and over again after combat. But in this game, they do it a lot too when you're gathering up resources. Depending on the character that you're currently playing as, they will say maybe like one or two different lines when they're gathering equipment, and I don't know if there's a way to turn it off, but I might recommend doing so, like just when you're not playing through the main game, but you're just gathering up resources and defeating random enemies. Overall though, I know I might sound a little down on it, but I actually do really like this game and the other Xenoblade games in the series. I think I will actually go as far to give this game a 5 out of 5. Despite its faults, it just feels at home for me now, and I am extremely excited for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. At the time of this recording, I'm debating whether I should do a playthrough of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the original main game, especially because this Torna prequel came with all, or maybe like not all, but most of the DLC for Xenoblade Chronicles 2. But that's still a lot of content. Now, this game took only about 16 hours to play through. It's more to act as like a side piece to the original Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which isn't that long for a Xenoblade Chronicles game, but the main game, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, without the DLC, took me around like 70 hours to play through. And if you had all the DLC, I think that's just way too much Xenoblade Chronicles, especially if I plan on playing through the third one whenever that comes out. So I think I'm going to skip to Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and I'll have to do my replay through of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 some other time. Well guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Torna, the Golden Country, or the Xenoblade Chronicles series in general, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!